Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm going to be filming my review and 3-demo look on the ColourPop Sweet Nothings eyeshadow palette. So this palette was actually an exclusive to Ulta along with the Rendezvous palette as well. I actually just googled how to pronounce this and hopefully I'm getting it right. Rendezvous. But these two palettes were exclusive to Ulta, but we actually don't have Ulta here in New Zealand. But most recently, they just launched it on the actual ColourPop website, so now us international buyers can get these palettes. I will be doing my review on the Rendezvous palette very soon, but I wanted to do the Sweet Nothings one first, and that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. I'm going to be going down right to the nitty-gritty on this palette, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts, swatches, dupes, the whole shebang, 3 looks. So if you guys are interested in hearing my thoughts, then just continue watching. So like I mentioned in the intro, this was an exclusive palette to Ulta and now we can get it off the actual ColourPop website. So for those of you guys that live internationally and didn't know, they do have this on their website now so we can all get our hands on it. But this palette is $16 US. You will get 5 mattes, 1 satin and 6 shimmers in here. Although 2 of them are repeat shades and 4 of them are already existing single shadow shades. I will get to that a little bit later on, but I thought I would let you guys know that first off the bat. So just jumping straight into my review, my first impressions of this palette, I actually was pretty excited for it. Even though they are shades that you can easily do, you know, it's a color family that we have seen before in the palette. It's nothing new or crazy special, but when I see a new ColourPop palette, I will always be so excited because I feel like ColourPop does a really great job of creating very cohesive palettes. Like the shades can sometimes look a little bit sporadic, but they always come together at the end. They're very cohesive together. So I'm just really excited to see all the new ColourPop palettes and the color combinations that they make into a palette, because in this little palette you do get a good range of mattes and shimmers, and I always look for that. I always want to see a good range of mattes and shimmers. I always like to see it half and half, and you really do get that with this palette. But in saying that, the range of the mattes, I personally feel like they could have added more transition shadows. The main mattes in here are most of these ones, which are more medium to dark tones. And it is really hard to use these darker tones straight off the bat as a transition shadow. You get this one, but I feel like it could have been a little bit lighter and then you just get like a matte highlight. There isn't like a very light transition shadow to go in with further blending to start off with the transition. So I feel like they could have added that one in. I also feel like they could have added in a light highlighting shade. So all of the metallics here are very medium, very dark. There isn't a shade in here that's very light and you can use it as a highlight. I mean, you can use some of them. They could have added a very like light golden champagne to use as a shimmer highlight. So I feel like those 2 things were missing. Although this is a good range of finishes, I think the range of shades isn't executed well enough. When I was creating my 3 demos, I did feel like, oh, I needed a transition. I wish I had a highlighting shade. So in the end, to highlight my inner corner and brow bone, I did just use my highlighter, and for the transition I just had to blend out for a little bit longer. As you guys know, I love the ColourPop formula, but sometimes the mattes are a little bit patchy. They are workable, but just comparing it to their normal mattes, there is like a little bit of a difference, and usually it comes with like the dark purples. I had a little bit of problems with Popular Demand and Truly. It didn't give me enough troubles where I wanted to like take off my eyeshadows and start all over again, or like just get so frustrated. I just kind of had to blend out a little bit more, kind of work around it in a sense. It wasn't to a point where I got so frustrated with it, but I thought I would just mention it with that. But just overall, creating my 3 looks and how I felt about this palette, I was very happy with it. I liked all 3 looks that I created. It was a very easy palette to create 3 looks with. In that aspect, I'm like, this is a great palette. But now I want to move on to my dupes and my little research into this little palette. And you guys might think otherwise, whether you want to buy this palette or not. So I'm just going to quickly put over the screen a little photo, little diagram that I did of this palette. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we have 2 repeated shades. So the 2 repeated shades we get are 1111, which comes in the All I See Is Magic palette, and then we also get Sparks Fly, which also comes in, I believe, the Element of Surprise palette, and then we have 4 existing shades. So Pretty Cruel, Come and Get It, 20 Something, and Upon a Star. these shadows you can actually already get as a single shadow. If you already have some of these single shadows, then you might not want to get, you know, this palette because it already has these single shadows in it. So with 2 already being repeat eyeshadows and the other 4 are single shadows, we are now left with 6 remaining shadows. So these 6 remaining shadows, I duped 4 of them. So I duped Out of Luck, On the Rise, Popular Demand, and Tuli, which I will put over the screen right now. And then we are pretty much left with the shade Canal and Mousse. Those are the 2 shades that I couldn't dupe anything to or compare it to from ColourPop's family of eyeshadows. So just looking at the palette afar, you might think, wow, this is a really nice palette, but when you actually play around with it, do a little name search on all the eyeshadow names, you will see that already half the palette already exists in ColourPop's family, and the other half you can kind of already dupe. So in saying that, it can go 2 ways. You could go one way where you're like, wow, like ColourPop is using so many repetitive shadows, this is nothing new. Or you can go in a way where you're like, okay, this is a really great palette, there are single shadows that I want from ColourPop, but I don't know which ones to pick. I don't know how to create it into a palette, and you might like this palette here. If you don't have any of these single shadows or any of the other ColourPop eyeshadow palettes, then you'll think this is a great palette. So it really depends on your perspective, what you already have from a ColourPop buyer. I see both sides, you know, I see it from the side where I own a lot of the ColourPop products. This palette is a little bit too repetitive for me, but then I also see it from the standpoint where like I don't like using single shadows. That gives me too much stress. I like using eyeshadows that are already made for me, like it comes in a palette, like here you go, I'm giving you this eyeshadow palette, use it. You know, I don't like to look at all of these single shadows and go through all of them and pick the ones that I like, because that to me is so stressful and it's really hard to really pick out the shades. You might get 2 of the same similar shades, you know what I mean, in the same palette, and you're like wasting your money that way. So I see it from both sides. It just really depends on where you're standing and which side you're kind of on. Honestly, if it wasn't for my dupes, I would not realize that a lot of these shades are repetitive shades or they come in other palettes. And to me, like, I'm not mad at that they are using repeated shades. It's just more like, I feel like they should tell everyone that there are repeated shades. Like, they should tell everyone, like, 2 of these shades, 1111 and Sparks Fly, came in other palettes, and 4 of these other shadows are in single shadows. I mean, if they did and I missed it, and that's completely my bad, my fault, but I personally didn't see it. They didn't do a swatch party on this on their ColourPop YouTube channel. I feel like they should just let us know, like, okay, some of these shadows are repeated shades, just be mindful of it in a sense, and then we can take the initiative to kind of decide if we want to buy or not. Because the only reason why I remember that 1111 and Sparks Fly are repeated shades in other palettes is because I film YouTube videos, and when I'm filming, I'm like, okay, now I'm going in with the shade 1111, I'm going in the shade with Sparks Fly, and I do 3 demo looks, guys, so I'm repeating the shades 3 times for one palette. It kind of gets like stuck in my brain. I do remember a lot of ColourPop shade names, but I can't pinpoint the palette that it came in. That's a normal person. You're not really speaking out the shade names. You don't remember the shade names, you know what I mean? And if I did it on YouTube, I'm not going through my whole ColourPop palette collection and finding dupes, because literally, guys, finding dupes takes me an hour to do. Like, just the dupes section alone takes me an hour. I'm swatching every palette. A normal person ain't gonna do that. But with that being said, again, this was an Ulta exclusive palette, so maybe because it was exclusive to Ulta, they don't want to make like a completely new palette. They wanted to add in some shades that they knew that their ColourPop customers love. So maybe these single shadow existing shades were like best sellers for them and they wanted to add it into this palette. I don't really know, but it's not like a brand new palette, like a brand new launch to ColourPop. It was mainly just for the Ulta exclusive thing, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. I'm unsure about this palette, if there are repeats. I haven't even opened it or swatched it yet, so we'll see. Okay, I feel like I've been blabbing on for too long on one eyeshadow palette, but I feel like there was a lot to discuss about the comparable shades, so hopefully you guys found that helpful. But now we can move on to the swatches and also the 3 demos. Alright, so to get started with the first look, we're going to be taking the shade Out of Luck, and I'm going to use this all over my lid space to set down my concealer, which acts as my eye base. Now I will be taking the shade Pretty Cruel, and this is going to act as our transition shadow. I'm mainly going to focus most of the pigment right at the outer corner first because I don't want too much definition in that inner crease like I usually would put it. Now taking the shade Mousse, I'm going to use this shadow to give myself a wing liner. I'm going to be doing exactly the same thing like I would be using my gel liner, and really just going to take my time building up that pigment. I'm just going to take a makeup wipe and just clean that edge a little. Now I will be taking the shade 1111, using this shade super wet, like I'm really drenching my brush with this. I'm going to place that right on top of that liner we created, but leaving a little gap at the tip of it. And I'm going to focus the glitter mainly towards the outer wing. Towards the inner corner, I'm going to leave it a little bit blank. Just going back into the shade Out of Luck, I'm going to place that right in the inner corner of my lid. Just really going to brighten up that little inner corner area. I'm going to go back into the shade Pretty Cruel, and I'm going to run this all over my lower lash line. And again, going back into the shade Mousse, I'm just going to push this up against my lower lash line. And now just taking the ColourPop Creme Gel Liner in the shade Exit, I'm going to use this in my bottom waterline. And to finish off the eye look, I'm just going to highlight my inner corners with the shade 1111. Alright guys, so this is the first look completed. For my lashes, I am wearing the Ardell Demi Wispies. These are the most natural lashes I had, and I really wanted to wear a lash where you still could see the glitter liner. But for my final lip pairing, I decided to go with the ColourPop Luxe lipstick in the shade Still Crazy to give it the perfect monochromatic look. Alright, so to get started with the second look, we're going to take the shade Out of Luck, and we're going to use this all over our lid space just to set down my concealer, which acts as my eye base. Then going into the shade Pretty Cruel, and this is going to be our transition shadow. I'm going to sweep that all over in my crease from outer to inner crease, making sure we're getting an even layer of this shadow in that crease region. Now just taking the shade Toolie, and we're going to place that right on our lid space first, focusing it really close to the lash line, and then we're going to slowly bring that towards the transition shadow, just up to my crease area, not going past that. And now we'll be taking the shade Mousse, and we're going to pack that right on our lid once again, but going to focus it a little bit lower. I'm not going to bring it too high. We want the darkest colors to be as close to the lash line as possible, and then it will fade out into the lighter colors, like a beautiful gradient. Now using the shade Come and Get It, I'm going to be using this shadow wet. I'm just going to dab it on to the center of my lid first, and then slowly pat it around once there's not too much product left on the brush. Taking the shade Canal, also using this shadow wet as well. This shadow is more of a metallic. I'm just going to place that at the center of my lid and just kind of mix it in with Come and Get It. So we're just going to really bring out those dimensions, just give a little more pop of color to the lid space. Going back into the shade Pretty Cruel, I'm going to sweep this all over my lower lash line, right from the outer corner into the inner corner. And again, taking the shade Mousse, I'm going to press this up against my lower waterline. And now just taking my Artisty in Motor eyeliner in the shade Coffee, I'm going to run this all over my bottom lash line. And this, guys, is the second look completed. For my lashes, I am wearing the Boudoir Lights from House of Lashes, and for my final lip pairing, I decided to go with the ColourPop Ultra Glossy Lip in the shade Aquarius. I love how this turned out. It's super easy and super glam, and I hope you guys like it too. Alright, so to get started with the first look, we're once again going to go in with the shade Out of Luck, and we're going to use this to set down my concealer. Next, we'll be taking the shade Popular Demand, and we're going to place that right into our crease using windshield wiping motions. Taking the shade Sparks Fly, I'm gonna put that all over my lid space and up to my crease. But we're gonna focus most of the shadow right at the outer corner first and then bring it towards the inner crease. I'm now just taking some concealer on the back of my hand, and I'm gonna start cutting out my crease by just damping the concealer right in the inner third of my lid space, bringing it towards to my crease, and I'm just going to follow the natural curve of my eyes to cut out my crease. Now, using the shadow on the rise, I'm actually going to use this shadow wet, but we're going to place that right on the center of our lid where the concealer fades out into the matte. And then using the shade 20 something, I'm going to place that right in the inner part of the cut crease area that we didn't place the purple. So 20 something is a little bit more glittery. It's not as metallic, so it's a shadow that you kind of need to just keep on building. But once you build it up, it is a stunning, stunning shadow. And I love mixing the gold and the purple together. I think it's such a pretty color combination. Alright, now I'm taking the shade Popular Demand once again, and we're going to run this all over our bottom lash line. And then going back into the shade Sparks Fly, I'm going to push this up against my lower lash line. And then just taking my Artisty in Moisture eyeliner in the shade Coffee, I'm going to use this to tightline my lower lash line. Alright guys, so this is the last look completed. For my lashes, I am wearing the iconic Lights from House of Lashes. And for my final lip pairing, I decided to go with the Lippy Pencil in the shade at Twilight. Okay guys, so that is going to complete my video for today. If you guys saw my adhesive brow throughout the video, I'm sorry. Top, you know, just wants to keep falling down. Itty bitty committee over here. But if you guys did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to let me know your favorite look out of the three in the comments down below. I would love to hear your feedback and what kind of looks that you guys like to see from me. Let me know how you feel about the palette, with it being very, very comparable, very dupeable, very existing already. But that is pretty much it for today's video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!